It's Larry with 7 Sage Law School Prep and another stick figure exam tip. This one is about dealing with psychological barriers to top grades. This one's not so tactical or exam oriented, but it's a bit broader. It's still very important because unless you see these potential barriers or these social forces that may act on you, you may have difficulty actually following our advice. So the particular barriers include peer pressure and the desire to please authority. It might be presumptuous to say that I know something about you, but as someone who is a law student at a competitive law school, I think I do know something about you. In psychological terms, law students tend to be pleasers. We're not, as a general rule, Steve Jobs types or Marina Abramovich types. Just kind of go out and do whatever it is they want to do without thinking too much about what other people want. There are other better motivations for entering law, but to some extent we tend to seek prestige and validation. Law is a relatively snobby profession where credentials matter a ton. It's not like art or business or maybe even literature where there are credentials, but what matters in the end is the product. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell when a lawyer is good in the same way that a good business makes tons of money or good literature speaks for itself. So a lot of us are immigrants and want to please our parents, but I've also noticed a lot of elite law students are children of people who have money and they want to enter something that's considered prestigious and important. And, this can even be true for those of you who aren't in it for the money. You want to be recognized for doing something meaningful or important in government or in public interest. We also tend to want to be considered smart by our peers. By the way we got into law school, we tend to be people who got good grades in college and were considered smart in getting into college and while in college. Law students also tend to want to please professors because it's that desire that tended to get you good grades in college. You sat in the front row, you went to office hours. Maybe you didn't, but at least some of these things should be familiar to you. You are not a rock star, right? Unless you are. But I think to do well in law school, even though a lot of these things got you there in the first place, once you arrive, you need to at least be aware of certain pressures and ignore them. And some of the things that got you into law school might make you susceptible to pressures that will cause you to not do well in law school. For instance, the desire to look smart. We have some image of us in law school, and this person goes, blah, 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 and these people back here go, can I have your autograph? And I want your baby, and I'm going to write down everything that you say. But of course, as we mentioned, looking smart in class has very little to do with the very particular skills you need to spend time on and hone to actually do well in law school. But to particularly look smart in class, you need to spend time mastering the Socratic method, which requires you to spend time reading and rereading cases so that the facts are at your fingertips when you're on call in class. But your time is limited, and the time that you spend kind of obsessively reading cases is time that you're not spending doing practice exams or memorizing black letter law. It's also time that you're sitting in class thinking, me, so smart, when you really need to be spending the entire time thinking very carefully about this person and what that person is saying. So you have to be pretty okay with not sounding super smart in class. Doesn't mean that you have to be an idiot, but the point of the time that you spend outside of class does not involve sounding super smart. It's focused on all of these other things. Similarly, you need to not be too concerned about doing what your professor tells you to do or impressing the professor during the course of class. And this pressure is a little bit different. It's kind of more negative. Many of us are driven by this, the kind of wanting people to think that we're smart, but some of us have the we're naked in class nightmare. A lot of us are also motivated by trying to avoid this. This is you, and you look kind of sad, and here's your professor, and look at how angry your professor is. Look at the bow tie, and he's like, oh, are you dumb, dummy? Did you not do the reading? Are you stupid? So even if this happens, ultimately it doesn't mean anything. Very few professors, unless you never come to class, will actually dock your grade because of something that you do in class, even if you look dumb. The other thing is, I've noticed that professors tend to use this kind of pressure on students who appear not to do the reading because professors have feelings as well, and they tend to react when students don't show up to class prepared. You have to remember that the professor's on a stage and they have some ego, as any of us would, wrapped up into teaching a class. So when people show up not having done anything, it makes them feel sad, but they wouldn't say that since they're authority figures. It makes them feel powerless. They can't make their students do anything, and so this gets expressed as anger to kind of prevent that from happening. It's not personal, so don't worry about it. So the other thing is there are all these things that professors tell you to do or not to do, even when they can't actually observe you. And yet I just don't understand why people actually believe the professor when they say don't buy commercial outlines or don't read canned case briefs because it's bad for you. How does the professor actually know that? They don't. They have no means of verifying who's purchased commercial outlines and who's still done well in class. So, unless this is the case and your professor will actually dock your grade for things that he can't even see that you're doing, you should do whatever you need to prepare correctly. Our approach is really just about spending your time on the right things. And it's possible that you might still look smart in class. Since you've been actually studying the law itself, you're not confused about what the law actually says or stuck in the weeds of some case. And if it's important to you to be thought of as smart by other students and the professor, it's not really the point. You just want to get to where you want to go. Just stop taking an immediate gratification approach to pleasing people. If you really ultimately need to think about this in terms of pleasing people, then think to yourself that the best way to do that is the way that's important. The thing that other students can't do and the thing that'll really make the professor like you is to get the A.